Welcome back to Real Estate Radio San Antonio with Carl and Stan on 9:30 a.m. The Answer. And we're here with Miguel Ortiz of the Ortiz Law Firm. And he's just got some really interesting stuff that we were talking about before we went on break. And I know, as we talked about it earlier today, this is things we wanted to share, and it's just what we want to bring back with you.
Well, we were talking originally about dividing up property when you're going through a divorce, but now we're talking about if you're going into a marriage and you own property or you own things prior to marriage, does that become community property, or is that so? That's kind of what we're talking about, Miguel. If you'll kind of share that information with our listeners.
It could, and I was trying. The example is better to be understood as an example is that people, since they're building their careers and the financial stability earlier, and before they compromise into marriages and making families and things like that, they bring into relationship their homes and retirement accounts and the nice car and a good checking account, their savings. And you see it in both sides. This is not just the male part of the couple. You see a lot of successful women nowadays. They bring all these things into the marriage. And what happens is that they start commingling their separate property into the community property. And it becomes to a point that it's difficult to separate the two. And most importantly, if you bring real estate, for example, and during the marriage you decide to refinance that property.
So let's straighten
talk
this out.
about that. Yeah. So if two people get married, and let's say I own a vacation spot, and we get married.
Okay.
Does that vacation spot automatically part of of who I marry?
No.
Okay.
The property will remain separate property.
It does.
Yeah.
Okay.
But just be careful here. You make me a little nervous when you talk about when you get
Well,
remarried.
okay. Let's talk about
Can't we use just a hypothetical person here?
when someone gets married.
Are you talking your own personal vacation home?
Yeah.
No, it's a little more complex than just that. By marriage doesn't mean title transfers. It doesn't happen that way. It will remain separate property as long as you don't do anything with the property that it could convert that into community. Usually you see that on refinancings, for example, and a lot of people don't know this. A lot of people, they get a home and they have $100,000 equity in the home, and they need money for whatever, maybe to improve the home or maybe to buy a new investment or whatever that might be. And they come and refinance that home that it was separate property while they're married to their new partner. And boom, just like that property went from separate property to be community property. And they don't realize it because they're still on their happy honeymoon stage, which hopefully lasts forever.
Right.
But the day that, pink and red and roses goes away and the other colors come in and people start asking questions, then that's when reality shock a lot of people. And I'm talking about, you see this so often that it's scary. And people come to my office and say, well, what about this house that I own? And I say, well, what's the last time that you did anything financially with it? Oh, 2 years ago I refinanced it and I got $20,000 out of it, and we did 1, 2, 3 with it. And I said, well, that property now is community property, and now it's part of the divorce, and now we're going to have to include it on that pot that I was talking earlier. You know, how we start throwing things in that pot. People unintentionally throw things in the pot without knowing. And as long you live happy ever after, and your marriage goes all the way until death do you apart, then there's no issues whatsoever. But if something else happens along the way, then it becomes a problem. And nowadays the likelihood to happen is between 40 to 50%. So one of every 2 marriages end up in court getting divorced, and most of the people go to 2 or 3 marriages during their lifetime. So that's a lot of transactions, that's a lot of coming and going, and that's a lot of stuff that can happen to your property. And
so how do we keep from that property transferring then? If that person refinances, how do we keep that from transferring into community?
Then you have to either sign a waiver. The person, the other side, could sign a waiver for interest on the property. is dividing community property while you're still married kind of deal.
Okay.
If you don't have a prenuptial. Now, if you have a prenuptial agreement, then most likely than not, that prenuptial agreement will prevent the conversion from separate to community. You really got to be very careful. It's a very fine line on that. But if you do a waiver and preventing that to transfer, then you need to make sure that, of course, your spouse get a lawyer also, that she gets the opportunity to consult with someone that you have nothing to do about. Don't take her to your own lawyer because there might be a conflict of interest there at some point. If that person complains and says, but he took me to his lawyer, so how would not? So, gave her $500 and have sent her on her way to pick her own lawyer or his lawyer. I say her, but it could be him or her.
That's
or,
right.
or his. So, take your spouse, give your spouse the opportunity to consult with somebody, make sure that she get the legal representation she needs and the advice she needs, and then you have clean hands if in the future is a problem.
Well, I have a question that relates to that. And if you're just joining us, you're listening to Real Estate Radio San Antonio with Carla and Stan, and we're here with attorney Miguel Ortiz. And we talked about that if you have a piece of property that belonged to one person before a relationship or marriage, and then you refinance it together, it becomes community property. What about if you add a structure? You add a pool to that home. Does it fall into the same thing, or you add a patio? You do major improvements to that property.
Then the portion of the cost that was added as to value on the property could be subject to argument under a divorce on the community property. And
it would
that's
just
a great
be
question.
It would just be part of it, but if you refinance, it's all of it.
Exactly. So So we
Separate.
so we have if you do something to the house that it worth $50,000 and the house increased in value $50,000, and that was done during the marriage, then $50,000 of that property that is separate property could be argued to be community property.
Interesting.
Yes. And so you got to be really careful on how you manage your real estate. You don't really have to be careful if you love your wife or your husband and you're planning to be happily thereafter together forever, blah blah blah. But
it's good to know these things. If you, we're here on 9:30 The Answer. It's a family show. We want everybody to be married forever.
Yes.
Want everybody to be as in love with each other as Carla and I are with each other, right, babe?
We don't.
That's right. That's right.
We don't want to encourage. I have one of the top mediators in town.
But it does happen, and we want people to be, and that's what we do. And we want to stress that it's to bring education to everybody about real estate.
The other day we were having a mediation, and the mediator, his name Michael Jackson, one of the best mediators in town. He goes and tells me, "Hey Miguel, my wedding anniversary is coming up." And Jeannie, his wife, is his secretary at the office, and I said, "Hey, how long you been married?" And he says, 42 years. And I'm like, "Wow, 42 years." And he said, "You know how I've been successful and in my marriage?" And I goes, "How?" And she said, "I always say, okay."
Honey,
That was funny.
Stan, can you say that?
Okay. I learned that a long time ago, and that is advice that's legal advice.
That's
for
legal
me.
advice,
right there. That's
so
good free
we're
legal advice.
We're not
Ortiz Law.
encouraging divorces. We're not encouraging divorces
We
whatsoever.
are not, but
No.
we're just encouraging for information.
Right.
I have a question, though, for you, Miguel. Many times when people need some advice from an attorney, they go online. If they don't, what we want them to do is we want them to come to realestateradio.sa.com and find the top experts. But some people just go online and start surfing, and they want a family law or divorce attorney. They look by first name. What are the quality, skills, and experience should someone look for when they're looking for an attorney?
Because every case is different, the skills required could be different because the issues might be different. For example, you can go and get divorced, and the main issues is the children. So you need someone who have a lot of years of experience dealing with custody matters. not property matters.
Oh, okay.
And it's difficult to go out there and find out who has the longest experience on those cases. And usually word of mouth as to the reputation of the lawyer, the cases that the lawyer has done, what type of, how many times lawyer has tried cases over a jury or over a judge, things like that. You can refer. And if your issues are property and it's nothing to do with the children, then you need an attorney who has done a lot of cases that deal property. Most of them is a combination of. And your best reference will be how many years that lawyer's been practicing. Is not the greatest indicator, but it's a good indicator. You can usually I tell my clients that ask me for referrals to other states or other places that I cannot go. I tell them talk to about 3 or 4 lawyers first.
So interview, basically.
Right.
Interview
your
and
lawyers
due diligence.
and talk to 3 or 4, compare prices, compare experience, and compare what information you get, and then make your best decision. You do not know what you're going to get, but that will be probably your best way to do it.
That's great
We're
advice.
just about out of time right here. How does someone get a hold of you?
My office number is 210-822-4200. My email is miguel@ortizlawyers.com. We are located at 909 Northeast Loop 410. We've been in the same place for 14 years, 13 years or something like that. Or you can reach me through you guys. You got my information.
Yep.
And you can look me up on the internet, and I'll be more than happy to help whomever needs our help and our advice.
Miguel, thank you
Awesome.
for being with us today.
Thank
you
you.
for having
You've been a splendid guest, and I want you to stay tuned for next week for our next show. And thank you for being part of Real Estate Radio, SA.com.